Welcome, everyone. Our discussion panel this morning is on summer research and internship opportunities. This is really aimed at undergrad as well as graduate students and finding ways to get more experience during the summer, as well as things that they can do to kind of help prepare the materials, rec letters, networking, all that good stuff that is really helpful in finding these important opportunities and getting access to them. So with that said, I'm going to turn things over to our panelists to introduce themselves, their names, pronouns, where they are going to school, and kind of what some of the things are that they've done in the past as far as these kinds of opportunities they've engaged with. So whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. Hi, everybody. I'm Noah. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm currently studying at Dartmouth College. Some of the experiences that I've had in the past, I've done an internship in Bristol in the UK, where I worked with a few professors on learning about Halkieria. It's basically tiny plated worms that appeared in the early Cambrian, as well as doing an internship back home in Bermuda about sea life and marine conservation and biology. Currently, I'm on a field program going around the US and learning about all the geology and features that have happened here.
All right, I'll go next. Sorry.
You go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sierra. I use she, her pronouns. I am a senior at Brown University in Rhode Island. And I have experience working for a literary agency and then doing an internship where I studied the foraging ecology of sea turtles. And then this past summer, I was at a Paleolithic archaeology site in Spain studying the birds that were there. So kind of paleo at an archaeology site.
And my name is Ethan Hovermale. I use he, him pronouns. I'm studying at Eastern Kentucky University. I have done a REU with Eastern Kentucky University where we were looking at birds in Appalachia. And now I'm working with the Kentucky Academy of Sciences to kind of do a museum-based project, trying to collect all of the natural history collections into one place to make them easier for researchers to find.
Excellent. My name is David Levering. I use he, him pronouns. I run the summer science camps and virtual world operations at the Sternberg Museum of Natural History here in Kansas. And I will say, just for disclosure about connections between everyone, all of the panelists today are former students for the camps program that I operate. And so kind of keeping in touch with them, and in some cases helping write letters, knew that they had all done these kinds of things in recent years and thought it would be valuable for other students to hear from how they went about finding as well as applying to those opportunities, as well as kind of how they went. So we're going to jump into questions. We've got our first one. Just where would a student go if they're looking for these kinds of opportunities? Where are some online resources that they could potentially find, lists, things that they can searchable databases? And Sierra, you had submitted this one, so we'll start with you on that.
Yeah, so the place that I started was looking at the NSF's REU database, Research Experiences for Undergraduates, because those are all paid, and there are 600 of them, 800 of them across all the different science disciplines. So if you're looking for something related to paleontology, that would probably be in earth sciences, biology, polar programs, or even like social sciences. If you're like archaeology, my thing is kind of translating archaeology and paleo, kind of mixing them. So I found opportunities in social sciences as well. That's like the biggest one. And then a lot of universities also have online resources that you don't have to log into. You're using university credentials to look at. So like Johns Hopkins has one and Columbia has one. So those are kind of the places that I start.
So when you put in like a search bar, would you be looking for, like, let's say, Columbia University internship database, or how did you actually go about getting onto those web pages?
I think I just looked up for like summer research opportunities in evolutionary bio
Got it.
is what I did. And then I also have a list that I kind of like have spread around. So if anyone's interested in looking at that, let me know.
Can you throw a link to it in the chat? Is it something we can distribute?
Yeah, I can share it on Google Docs. It's a Google Doc.
Yeah,
I'll
maybe
do
on
that and someone
view,
else talk.
yeah, view only. We'll can share that with folks. Noah, how about you? You have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah. So the majority of internships and programs that I've gotten into have actually been mostly either word of mouth or places that I've already done work and research at. So, for example, the internship I did at home was at the Bermuda Aquarium and Natural History Institute. And I already had experience being a volunteer there and being around. So when the time came, they were just sort of like, hi, just to put this on your radar, we have a cool internship that we're starting up. If you want to try it, you can give it a shot. And I applied to it, and the rest is history. So I think, unfortunately, I don't have as much muscle on the online side of things, but I would just like to say, like, it's fantastic to start looking at these opportunities and getting in touch with these organizations ahead of time, because once they know who you are and know that you're out there looking for these opportunities, people that you know might start reaching out to you, and those connections will form by themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing, a really important point. Because you're talking about arguably some like smaller things you started doing at home with like a local aquarium, and that has led to much bigger things. It sounds like that you're doing now, like this multi-state operation that you're currently involved with, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more later on in the discussion. Ethan, how about you?
So my experience has been a lot like Noah's. It's all been about just knowing people, and they'll introduce you to the right people to find them. But I do know that Elevation Science Institute, which is a nonprofit, they have their own internship, but on their website they list like a ton of really great paleontology internships specifically. Like there's Great Plains Dinosaur Museum, Makashika State Park in Montana, Wyoming Dinosaur Center. There's a ton, and they all collect them in one spot, which is nice if you're wanting to do something specific in paleo.
Gotcha. Do you have a URL for that you can throw in the chat?
Yeah, I
quick?
can throw that in the chat too.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's see. So, Noah, we're going to go with one of the questions that you submitted. And this is a question, we'll start with Noah, but go to each of you. What is the single most important piece of advice you would give for pursuing internships and research opportunities?
I think the single most important piece of advice I would give for this is speak to people. I know that sounds really like obvious. I'm going to go into a little more, but this is something that I found to be just completely invaluable. Ahead of time, before going into university and before going into these sorts of things, I just made some like perfunctory like reaching out, like, hi, I'm interested in this sort of area. Is there anything you can tell me about that? And that's actually paid off immensely in ways that I didn't think possible. People have been reaching out, like, here's some stuff that I thought you might be interested in. And I found that in general, this might not be the same everywhere, of course, but where I've been working, all the paleontologists that I've met have been incredible people, and have been almost more than happy to share either connections, internship opportunities they know about, colleagues. And I found that that's really helped me to both learn more about the field, learn more about what's out there, and also be able to apply myself and get those opportunities with the right connections and with the people that you know about it. So highly recommend speaking to people. If you're in university already, talk to your professors. Please talk to your professors. A lot of them really just want to get to know you and learn about you. And if you're not in university yet, potentially reach out to professors at universities that you might be interested in, researchers there, or museums in the area. So
yeah, so it sounds like kind of putting yourself out there and engaging with people is really important.
Yeah, 100%.
Ethan, we'll go to you. Do you have anything you want to add to what Noah was saying?
Yeah, just a little expansion of what Noah was saying. I think, at least from my experience, a lot of undergrads seem to be very scared to talk to their professors, which you really shouldn't be. If you are very vocal in class and you just bring up to your professors that you want to do research, your professors went to grad school, so if there's no one at your university who's working on something you're interested in, I guarantee you your professor knows someone or knows someone who knows someone, and they can introduce you, and it's a great place to start.
Sarah, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, so my experience was I did a lot of like cold applications because my strategy was kind of I wanted to diversify my skill set. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna apply to stuff that, my advisor doesn't know anyone in the field. So if you're doing that, which I highly recommend, you got to really put a lot of time into it and apply to a lot of things. I think my sophomore year of college, I applied for 40 internships and I did get 4 of them. And then obviously I chose the one that was best for me. But you gotta apply for a lot.
Yeah. And I know that was something where you had a pretty good list going for all those things that you were going after, which is a good strategy to make sure you get at least something when everything is said and done. We've got some questions in the chat that I want to jump to real quick. So one from Krista: what are the options for people who aren't physically near a museum or a university? Are there remote opportunities for undergrads or postgrads who want more experience? Feel free to jump in. Yeah,
I'm
go
not
for it.
super sure about remote opportunities, but I do know that at least the REUs that I applied for last year do have a travel grant that they give out to people who are not close. So it would be worth applying to those if you were interested in doing something that you're not super close to. There's opportunities for you to still get there.
Yeah, and the housing is provided for all REUs. Provided and paid for. Yeah. In terms of remote, sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
In terms of remote opportunities, that might be a place where like cold emailing and just reaching out directly, like reaching out through an advisor through a non-formal program might be something that is more useful. Because a lot of the formal programs that exist want to get people like on their campuses. So remote opportunities are more of a thing you can kind of invent yourself. And you could definitely also look into science communication and science journalism because those can be done from anywhere. I know I've seen National Geographic sometimes has internships, and like I think like NOAA had a SciComm internship as well at one point. So I know that those things can be done remotely. I think Paleo Society is a social media internship, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, just to add on to that, more on the side of travel, and if you can't get to somewhere, this is something that I know very well. I'm on an island about 700 miles away from the nearest natural history museum of any like real caliber. So highly recommend also reaching out to places in your area. So if remote internships don't work out, because they are a lot fewer than physical internships, also looking at areas around you that maybe aren't exactly what you want to do, but might help you towards that. So if there's like a smaller museum, smaller projects, community colleges nearby, even if they don't have exactly what you're looking for, they can be a good fallback just in case.
And if you're located in the US, if you're located in a remote area, there's likely some sort of research going on there because of the amount of research that's going on in different places. So you might like I know like 40 minutes from my house in the middle of nowhere is like a little experimental forest thing. So like there are things that exist that you might not even know about.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to also think about, I know some of you have mentioned diversifying already, but getting early experience, you don't need to necessarily be getting experience in exactly the thing you're the most passionate about. Like if you really, for example, really want to study dinosaurs, but you're not near a natural history museum and you're not near a place where there are dinosaur fossils, getting experience with just how to do a project of any kind and working with any kind of professional that can then write you a letter is a great first step. Let's see, we're getting a couple more coming into the chat. Let's see, from Eric: what if you graduated with a bachelor's and are currently applying for a master's? Are options fewer for people in that position? Let you all speak. I speak to that as best as you can.
I just don't know. I'm not in your position yet, so I just am not able to speak on it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know that REU programs are only for current undergrads, but I know that a lot of the non-REU programs do accept people who've already graduated. So I think Kurtlandia, which is at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, the Mammoth site, some of the dinosaur centers, those are some options. And also volunteering might be a good option at like a local place. Because maybe if you're not an undergrad anymore, you are making a living and have some time to volunteer.
The National Park Service or the Department of the Interior also has opportunities for folks who might be like between undergrad and graduate school or in graduate school or still undergraduates with like seasonal positions.
Oh yeah.
And you can find those. I think those are listed. You can apply for them through usajobs.gov, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yep.
And those get shared around quite a bit on Paleo social media once applications open up. If you're not following Rebecca Hunt Foster on the socials where you can, I recommend doing so because she's usually pretty good about sharing that stuff when it becomes open.
And also, the Texas A&M Wildlife Jobs Board has a ton of seasonal positions.
Yeah, it's also true. Noah, did you have anything you wanted to tack onto that?
Unfortunately, I'm also not in that position. It's a couple of years before I will be, so I'm not too knowledgeable about that. But I do know that some graduate students do a lot of research specifically with their school or department. So that could be a stand-in for internships specifically. But I understand if you want to go outside of that, it might be a different story.
Yeah. Yeah, Ezekiel, that's a really good point. The USGS also has opportunities that folks can look into that are good kind of first or second opportunities that tend to have relatively low requirements for like their base level positions and internships. Let's see, from Rebecca McKean, from an advisor perspective, yes to talking to your professors. Most of us genuinely want to help and we'll try to connect you to the right places. Absolutely. And also from Rebecca, GeoCore. Yep, that's a great one also. Is also a great option with some paleo opportunities. And there's a link here that we'll try to make sure gets put into the description when this all goes on to YouTube. Let's see if we have any other questions that have come in. Yeah, from Christina. In the past, there have been opportunities for non-undergrads. I was able to intern as a recent master's graduate years ago. Yeah, so there's definitely opportunities for folks past undergraduate out there. Yeah, geoscientists in the parks also takes recent graduates. Yep. Let's see, also from Dara. So Dara addressing a question from Krista earlier, saying, I would reach out to places you were interested in. I was not only physically located near a museum, I was not physically located near a museum growing up, and cold emailed some people to see if I could help out. Well, I got some no's. I did get a yes. Also, as someone who runs a museum, I would be happy if someone contacted us with a resume or an idea on how we could help. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's I think has already come up and will continue coming up is, I don't know the phrase, you can't win if you don't play. Like you need to put yourself out there and talk to people and like what Dara just said in her in the chat, like to probably get some no's, to probably get some non-responses. But if you don't talk to people and kind of put yourself out there, you're definitely not going to get anything at all. So let's see some other questions. So do any of you have advice for students who may need to travel on a small budget in order to get to an internship or other such opportunity?
The website Skyscanner is a good resource for finding cheap flights.
Gotcha.
I've used that. And then also public transportation can be a way to get between like smaller areas within a city. I think a lot of, especially like I live in Rhode Island, so I feel like our public transportation system is good and very underutilized.
Yeah.
Also, I know that a number of universities have specific coaches, buses, trains, transportation, etc., that goes to like major cities around them. So if you can find sort of that transportation, that can be a really easy way to get from, like, say, like a large city like Boston or New York to a lot of the surrounding universities.
I would also just keep an eye out for travel grants. There are a lot of them that go unused.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that's grants and scholarships in general, right? Like a lot of things that just people aren't applying for, and then if you're one of the three that actually apply, your chances are pretty good. Let's see. I think we talked about this a little bit already. So do you have any recommendations for writing your internship application? Sierra, this is another one that you had kind of pre-submitted, so we can start with you on that.
Yeah, my recommendation is to have other people look at it before you submit it. Even if it's someone who's not, it's often good if it's someone who's not in the field, because something that I've heard a lot of people are looking for are people who are able to communicate their ideas effectively. So if like your mom can understand it, then that is generally a good thing. My mom reads all of my stuff. She's just like that. But that's definitely something I recommend doing, and also having like an advisor read it, or like if you're working like with a grad student in your lab, like you're making sure, and also read about people that you're applying to work with. You don't want to look at someone who's studying birds and be like, hey, I want to like study like fish in your lab. Yeah, that's
Definitely.
Yeah, sort of just carrying on from what Sierra said with that, sort of looking at what that internship is sort of looking for, or what they might be in need of, and seeing how you might be useful for that internship, or what skills you have that you can bring to the table. If you don't have skills, that's okay. There's lots of opportunities to get them in either internships, working with research, doing smaller science projects outside. This is why like internships and projects that aren't paleo are really helpful, because they help you build that skill set that then is very valuable later on.
There's no
like
such thing as a
camps.
person with no skills, though.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I think, yeah, a lot of people like say like I have no experience in the field, but even like working retail is great for internships because it means you know how to communicate with the public effectively, which is super helpful for working in a museum or a SciComm related internship.
Let's see, we've got something coming in the chat. From Dara, as someone who hires internships, show how your skills are transferable. Absolutely. The resume /application is the only snapshot the interviewer gets to choose you. Yeah, so if you're going to get to that interview stage where they actually get to talk to you, making sure that you're communicating effectively in your paperwork, which I think leads us well into another question we had. So for opportunities that require, well, let's expand on the writing strategies. I don't think we got to everyone quite yet on that, so we can stick with that question for the time being.
I would just recommend editing ruthlessly. Have 2 or 3 drafts. In high school, I was the kind of person who would only draft one thing up and then send it in. And I think for internships or things that are kind of more important, it might be helpful to have, like Sierra said, people go through it and then just edit.
Yeah. And then I'm also like, I was in the position where I was applying for like 40 things. So a lot of them required similar application questions. So I kind of had a long Google Doc that was like called useful text snippets, and like a little thing about like my experience in athletics and my experience at Sternberg camps and my favorite class that I've taken. People ask a lot about that. For at least specifically for RUs, people like that one. So yeah, just you can copy and paste. And then of course, edit to tailor it to the place that you're applying, because you don't want to submit something that says Dartmouth if you're applying to Brown.
Right. Yeah. Those little things can be a real I don't know, bucket of cold water in your application, unfortunately. Yeah, and I want to reiterate what kind of what's been said already about editing, as well as getting other people to look at it. even if they're not an expert. If you spent like 20 hours or 5 hours, whatever the case may be, like writing any particular thing, your brain has glazed over a lot of little stuff. And if you're going to make sure you're catching small language mistakes, spelling errors, like that, having somebody that hasn't been staring at it that many hours, they're going to see all that little stuff that you're just like glazing right over. So yeah, don't feel like you need only your professors to read it or something like that. Get like a friend of yours and say like, I will buy you pizza and if you read this or something, I don't know, or just have them do it out of the kindness of their heart, whatever works best. So for opportunities that require recommendation letters, what other strategies would you recommend for students when they're going around getting those letters of rec, as well as kind of the process of them getting written and submitted and all that other good stuff?
I'd say for the process of getting recommendation letters, I would say this process actually starts a long time before you know you need the recommendation letter.
Sure.
And I think one of the most important things you can do for that is to build and then maintain relationships with professionals around you. So scientists, co-workers, former teachers, professors, really anybody who you've been in contact with. Maintaining close relationships, or any relationship at all, can be really helpful, because you never know when down the line you might need them to write a recommendation letter for you or speak to someone on your behalf. And having those relationships already set up and built and cultivated ahead of time is going to be super important. Also, it's happened to be quite a lot. Professors and researchers have a lot to do, and they often forget. So if you have that sort of relationship with your professor and you can just be like, hey, still waiting for this. Sometimes they will forget and you might need to remind them, and that's okay. It can be really scary to be like going up to, someone in your field that you respect, that is a mentor to you, and asking for this. But I found that a lot of the time they're pretty happy to help out. And if they're not, they'll let you know pretty quickly. And that's just usually the end of it. So yeah, those are my 2 cents on recommendation letters.
Great, thank you.
And I would also just kind of recommend not necessarily going to the person who you think has the job that is the closest to this internship that you want to do. I would recommend trying to get a letter of recommendation from someone who knows you very well and can write a stronger letter of recommendation tailored to you, that's a little more specific.
And then most places that at least I've applied for require 2 rec letters. So I think something that's been really important for me is getting 2 different perspectives. So like if I take like a research-based class, then that's going to give a very different perspective than like my boss at a job, or like a seminar discussion-based class. So I think that's something that is really important, is not getting 2 of the same rec letter, because each rec letter, like applications are short, right? So each rec letter provides a little window into who you are. And if you just get the same window twice, then that's not very helpful for you or for the person that's reading your application.
Yeah, and I was wondering if you could all expand on your strategies for actually like writing that request to somebody to get the rec letter. Like, how are you formatting that? Or is there any particular kind of way that you found is successful getting people to say yes to providing you with those necessary documents?
So for asking people for rec letters, a lot of mine have been slightly more informal, because I usually know the person pretty well before asking for the rec letter. But usually the most important pieces of information that I include in a request are what it is, where it is, and what time I need it by. Those sort of things. So what it is really helps them, because if they want to emphasize a specific part of you that they know that might be interesting or useful for that project. Where it is, because hey, they might know someone from there or know something that institution or program wants. And when you need it by is also important, because if they don't know, how can they really help you that much? And I also recommend definitely giving them a date that's a little earlier in advance than the actual due date, just in case there's any mishaps or funny mistakes.
Yeah.
Then I usually put that together in an email, give a little more description, and send it off.
I normally try to ask in person for the first time and then follow up with an email if I can. Especially like since most people who I'm asking for rec letters I'm in contact with and like meeting for other reasons, just because those are the people who can provide the best rec letter for me or people that I talk to. So that's normally something I try and bring up first, not over email, so that it kind of is a little more natural. Obviously sometimes this can't be avoided. And then also I send my CV when someone's like, yeah, I'll write you a rec letter. I'm like, okay, great. Here's my CV so that you actually can refresh your memory and not get me and Noah mixed up. Because I know everyone has like a million students, and it can be really hard. And also if there's a little button on whatever whatever like portal I'm going through or anything, that says resend invitation, I make liberal use of that button. So a week before, 3 days before, 1 day before, and I often get the response, oh, the system is helpfully reminding me. And it's like, that's not the system, that's me.
The best advice I ever got at a Sternberg camp was learn how to be professionally annoying. And I think
Very good. Did you have something you wanted to add to that? Sorry, I think I interrupted you.
no, that was it.
That was it. All right. And from Kenshu in the chat, Kenshu Shimada, but to clarify for rec letters for graduate schools, I suggest to make sure multiple letters are from professors from one school, because academic competencies are being evaluated. Yeah, for sure.
Personally, I don't know anything about applying to grad school yet because I'm just starting to do it myself. But I can say pretty confidently that for internships, normally they'll be like, it has to be from your school, or it can be from anyone, or we would like one academic reference and one character reference. So normally there'll be instructions based on that. So you don't have to kind of figure it out on your own, which is nice.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as far as the grad school applications, one mistake I made was getting rec letters from graduate students who had TA'd my labs, which I found out the hard way is a no-no. Maybe not universally. I don't know if I know enough broadly about how all that works to say it's a universal rule, but I found out after the fact that I had a bunch of applications basically like put into the round file, so to speak, because I had rec letters from grad students and not faculty. So if you're unsure, find out a way to ask. You're around your TAs a lot, and so they're tempting targets to get rec letters from, but oftentimes for grad school, I think they're really looking for letters from faculty. I don't know if any of our faculty in the chat can kind of confirm or deny that that's the case, but that's been the experience that I've had. Yeah, and I want to reiterate the reminders thing, like people are busy. If you haven't heard from them on the letter yet, just send them a polite reminder. They're likely just accidentally forgot because they have a million other things to do. Yeah, from Kenshu again in the chat, absolutely yes, letters from faculty. And let's see. Anything else? And another piece of this is just more of a me thing, but I think it's something important that can be brought up. If I'm going to say yes to writing a letter in the first place, I will usually let whoever I'm writing it for review it before I send it to make sure it's talking about the things that they want discussed. And if I feel like I'm not comfortable writing a letter that I would be all right with the person reading, I probably need to not be writing a letter for that person. And that's something else to keep in mind for students, is that you might have somebody that you ask for a letter for say no because they feel like they don't know you well enough to give you a good letter recommendation. Well, that can be a bummer in the moment. They're arguably doing you a favor because you don't want a bad letter. And so if they have the courtesy to tell you like, I don't think that's a good idea, I don't think I can write you a strong letter for this thing that you're doing, just you can either arguably not respond or just say thank you, I appreciate your honesty, and move on.
Yeah. Also have one more thing to add.
Go for it.
As someone who had to ask for 8 rec letters for something that I ultimately got rejected for, as always, it's not normal for people to, like, David is kind of an exception in that he lets people review their rec letters. Most people don't do that. So you kind of have to tell them what you would like them to emphasize and just hope that they do that. So if you don't tell them what you you want them to emphasize, then they're not gonna know, and you're never gonna know that they wrote like a mediocre rec letter. So just make sure you're kind of upfront with what would be the best for you, and then they can use their professional capability, like decisions making skills to decide whether they are going to listen to you or not. Because sometimes they know better, and they're like,
Sure.
you want, like they've been doing this for a while, most likely.
Yeah. Ethan, Noah, do you have anything you want to add to that? Okay. Let's see.
Perfectly.
Great. We've got some stuff coming in the chat. From Christina Bird, what is the most valuable thing you learned from your internships?
That's a big question. I feel like there's a couple things that I really learned from, especially doing some research. I learned how far I can go, what I can take in the field, which is super helpful. I learned how science works, which I think, when you're in a classroom, it's kind of nebulous. It's like science is what's in this textbook, but when you start doing some scientific work, no, science is a whole way of thinking, and it takes practice to get good at it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I could take from it.
For me, I would say I've done 3 like major internships in completely different things. So I just kind of learned how much I could fit into a certain amount of time. So like I worked for a literary agency, and that one I figured out how fast I could write. And then I did turtle research, and then I figured out like how much R can you learn in one summer. And then I also learned like how I started on my senior thesis this past summer in my internship, and I was learning about how much I could really get done towards a major project in a time frame, and just learning about myself and my limits in lots of different ways. So I thought that was really useful.
So things that I learned most of my internships. First one was the community, a community of the science community in general, but also community of that area and that field. It was really nice to learn about how people interact with one another, what professional courtesy is like in that community, how to get your point across, how to communicate. Those have been really helpful. And also what I'm interested in. Internships have been really helpful for actually pinning down what I want to do later. And I still don't exactly know, but I've been able to like rule some stuff out and focus in on another certain area. So I definitely recommend taking internships that maybe aren't exactly in like your specialization per se, but in areas that you might be like interested in, or that might be most available for you if you're not in an area with large internships. And those can really help you narrow down what you might want to do and focus in. And in the long term, that can be super helpful.
We've got a question in the chat from Mike Coyne, another one of our camps alumni. What piece of advice do you really wish you'd known when you started with first applying for internships and other opportunities?
You're going to get a lot of no's. It's not an attack on you at all. It's just there's a lot of people applying, and sometimes you're not going to get it, and that's fine.
Yeah. You'll get rejected from 90% of things you apply to, and that's just the way it is. And everyone else is doing it too. So eventually, if you keep pushing and you refine your materials and stuff, you'll get something. And even if it's not what you originally wanted, it might end up being what's best for you. Like there's no opportunity will go unwasted if you're really trying your best. Like even if you absolutely hate something, I think it's still worth it to do most of the time, unless you're in like an abusive environment, then you should leave. But other than that, there's nothing, I don't know, nothing worth doing is easy. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I would kind of say partially the same thing. So sometimes you might get into an internship that you don't like, and you realize, hey, this field, I thought I was going to be super interested in it. Turns out maybe not so much. That's okay. And like Sierra was saying, there's still things that you can get out of it. One thing that I do before like researchships and internships is like create a list or an idea of goals that I want to potentially get out, even if all else fails. What do I want to get out of this internship? And usually it's figure out if I like the community, if I like the project, if there are other projects that this can lead into or dovetail into, and making connections with the people. Those are usually my big four that I go into an internship or research project with. And I've done a few that I didn't enjoy as much. And having those goals there were really helpful to actually like have a purpose for being there and to still get something out of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's really important advice as far as making the most, not wasting opportunities that you manage to get yourself access to. You never know which person you meet or which I don't know, weird little skill you pick up might end up being really important down the line. And so yeah, having that attitude is definitely very helpful. Let's see. We have a question from Eric in the chat. Could ample volunteer and outreach participation compensate for a lack of undergrad internships?
I'm not qualified to answer that question.
Yeah.
I'll try to help with that a little bit. So they're not always the same thing. And it really depends on what you're doing with the outreach experience. Showing that you're really dedicated to contributing and being involved is good. Absolutely. I'd hesitate to say that they are a one-to-one replacement for each other. Now, if you're doing things like if you're getting leadership opportunities for outreach, we're actually organizing things and you're showing some more advanced organizational skills and people wrangling skills, that may be a little bit better. But yeah, it kind of depends. I would say it's a bit of a case-by-case basis. At least that's, and as someone that does a bit of hiring of graduate students as well as undergrads here and there for my programs, that's how I would be kind of evaluating things. Is like if they both had 4 pieces of experience on a CV and one was for research internships and one was for one-day outreach programs, well, each of those internships might be some number of weeks or months. So the total amount of experience there is just outright larger. If the outreach is 4 different programs that they've been involved with each for 1 to 3 years, like, okay, so you've been really dedicated to engaging with this for a while. You've probably learned some very applicable skills. And so that's getting to be a bit more like, okay, I can see that I can see what you're doing, the skills you're picking up with this a bit more clearly. Let's see. Yeah, and a response from Dara also. Not a stupid question. That depends on the internship, but really how you present your experience. Again, show how your experience is relevant to the job you're applying for. Explain what you did and how the people doing the hiring or looking at your application can utilize that experience. Let's see if we have any. So I guess since this is the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, and I would like to kind of give some things that are directly relevant to that. How would you say your indirect opportunities have helped you think about vertebrate paleontology in new or different ways?
I would say that like the invertebrate work in direct work that I've been doing with birds has helped me think about how science as a whole works. And doing so has directly led to some potential vertebrate paleontology work coming up in this next year. Just learning how the science works and how you can apply what you're learning to vertebrate paleontology is a super useful skill that you can really only get by doing science.
Yeah, and I think for me, something that was helpful was my experiences have made me realize how much what we call disciplines are really connected, and how everything is kind of disciplinary. Because like last summer I went on a thing and they were like, this is Paleolithic archaeology. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, I want to do like a project based on this. And it's like, I am using vertebrate paleontology methods. I am doing vertebrate paleontology. I'm working on birds. So we don't kind of need to label things. like vertebrate paleontology is something you can get into from many different angles because it is such an interdisciplinary field of study. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the best advice that I've ever gotten for approaching college has actually been from David. And it was undergraduate is when you when you're building your toolbox, and that's something to focus on a lot. And that's something that I've sort of taken into and has been really helpful as a perspective of looking into internships, research opportunities, that sort of thing. The tools that we pick up here are, as Sierra said, super translatable, potentially into vertebrate paleontology or other things. One of the major things that I've learned from internships is how to ask questions, or how to approach answering those questions potentially. And that has had big ramifications, not only for those internships, but also in vertebrate paleontology.
Just adding on to that, what you guys are saying, I think is super applicable. From what I've been learning, the field methods are remarkably similar in most disciplines. Like learning how RStudio works is super useful for any science you want to do. R is largely the same in any discipline.
And you can kind of apply things that you learn from one place to things from another. So like I took a bioimaging class, isn't really an internship, but I took a class and we were imaging cells, and then I was like, wait, I could like use this for my thesis and use this for the bones that I'm looking at. So I think that's like everything is applicable to everything else, if especially like in this era where we are kind of moving beyond just like describing fossils and like trying to do more things with them. Obviously that's been going on for a while, but there's new methods being invented in so many different fields that I think it's useful to look at different ones. I don't know if that made any sense.
No, that crosses over a lot with our future paleo panel that we had last night, where our panelists were kind of discussing interdisciplinary work and new technologies being brought to apply to paleo questions. So I think that fits very well.
And I think paleontology is kind of a unique field where it is very, very interdisciplinary. There's a lot of different things that you can go to kind of ask questions about the past.
Absolutely. We're starting to run down on time. I want to encourage folks, if they have any more questions, to toss those into the chat so that we make sure we get to everybody before we have to close this down. I guess I would like to just kind of open it up to our panelists to talk about anything that we might have missed or anything else that they would like to recommend to students out there, or to advisors, to PIs that might be helping their students with finding or applying these opportunities.
I think for advisors, it's important to remember that we are all very new to this, and we don't know the norms of the field. Like, we don't know whether we should be reaching out to people in advance or whether we should just be like looking for opportunities. And like sometimes like universities have a mailing list for every department and new undergrads don't get added to them. Or sometimes there's like a Facebook group that you can join, like Paleo Jobs. Shout out to Paleo Jobs. Great Facebook group. Although what is it called? Like under/unemployed.
Under/unemployed, yeah, paleontology, something.
Yeah, something like that. It's in the list that I sent in the Google Drive earlier. So just remembering that we have no clue what we're doing, and we are really trying our best. Yeah, that's kind of advisors. My advice for advisors. Thank you so much for coming. If you're an advisor, for coming to this chat and trying to understand what is going on in the current psyche of undergrads.
And I'll say that page that that Sierra was talking about, and Dara just spelled out in the chat, they put a lot of the government paleo jobs on there that are applicable for both undergrads and postgrads, folks who are in graduate school that need summer support. It really is a great page. I'm glad that it got brought up in this event. Noah, Ethan.
We actually have a question in the chat from Michael.
Oh, okay. We'll see if you have any recommendations for folks, but we'll see what Michael has to say. I'll ask more a general question. What was your favorite internship and or experience you gained through an internship? You only have one favorite, remember. You have to pick one. What's the best one?
The best one for sorry. The best one for me was I did in my turtle internship, it was like a cohort program, and we were like, let's do as many bio-related activities as we can this summer. And we went bioluminescent kayaking in Florida, because that was where we were. And it was insane. Because it was a bunch of biology students all looking at crazy glowing things in the dark in kayaks. It was awesome.
Ethan, Noah, you want to tack anything onto that?
I think this museum project I've been working on for Kentucky Academy of Sciences has been really, really exciting, because there's just like a ton of little hidden gem collections in Kentucky that I don't think anyone really knows about, and it's great to just be able to talk to the people who run them.
Yeah, I'm at least a little bit aware of the work you've been doing on that, and I think that's really good, important work that you're getting involved with as far as broadening access to all that information. How about you, Noah?
I think my favorite experience in an internship was when I went to Bristol to look at little creatures. My favorite experience was actually just getting to explore, like poking around the Bristol Department of Paleontology, speaking with professors there, and sort of learning about all the different ways that they managed to get into their fields. A lot of professors that I've spoken to had no idea that they were going to be doing this as their day job. And then it just kind of happened. So learning about all those different experiences and ways that people found their way into this field and into this environment has been honestly just really cool, really inspiring, with how much they've faced.
And I want to get to this question from Christina, because I think this is a really great one. Do you have any advice for folks who are developing internships? So folks in museums, folks in universities, or in other programs where they may be creating opportunities for undergrads, postgrads, etc.
I think making it pretty clear what is going to happen during the internship is a very important thing. Like, oh, this is a project that has already started and you are going to be working on it, or you have complete freedom to do whatever you want. Both of those can be appealing for different people, but you will never, like, I feel like it's hard to know as an applicant what you're getting into unless it's laid out for you. And also giving people a chance to really show who they are. I feel like for me, like certain open-ended questions are better than others. Like I enjoy the write a personal statement question, because then I can write about what's important to me. Whereas if someone's asking like, what's your favorite class? I feel like then if that's like one of the main things you're basing my application on, then I feel like I can't really explain the context of who I am and what I would bring to the table. So that's my thoughts.
I would say, as someone who's just kind of dipping my toes into the waters of internships, that whatever you wish you could have done as an undergrad is way more helpful than anything I could tell you to do or give you advice for.
Something helpful that I think would be on internships is resources for the area around. As somebody who comes from a place, I'm from Rita, tiny island in the middle of nowhere. So often internships in like big cities or museums will be like, hey, we're in this city, we're doing X, Y, and Z. Come along. And learning, sort of being able to have more resources and background on maybe what that area is. I know that's maybe not your place to say, and that people can look that stuff up online, but housing and transportation I found are often very vague on some internships, and that's been really difficult trying to base my next 3 months on. Is like a slight promise or an idea of housing provided. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Right.
On my
And
last
if you're paying, sorry.
On my last internship, my professor was like, you can house with the undergraduates. And then I called them up and they were like, no, you can't. So that was really nice to know ahead of time. And I think just having specific information on housing and transportation, I think is super important.
And don't advertise a paid internship if your stipend is less than, like, if you can't buy groceries on the stipend, then I wouldn't consider it a paid internship. Like, I don't know. I think paid implies that you're going to have enough money to at least eat during the week. That's something that gets on my nerves when I'm like, you get $3 a day. Great. Like,
Yeah, I want to reiterate that particular point, just speaking for I know some of the other students that are currently in or soon to enter like undergraduate programs through the things I operate, being really upfront about the financial situation, to the point where you might feel like you are undercutting yourself a little bit, but it's way better to make sure you're not bringing a student or an intern or employee into a situation where they are becoming financially precarious while they are doing a thing for you.
and it's
Go for it, Sierra.
especially if like you're hiring current undergrads. A lot of schools have offices of undergraduate research that provide living expenses and stipends for people who are doing summer internships if they're unpaid, but you can't apply for those unless you know that you're not going to be paid or that you're going to be paid only a very tiny amount. That was an experience that I got into.
Yeah, and there's a big accessibility and equity conversation there about that maybe is beyond the scope of this particular event, but I think needs to be mentioned as far as keeping in mind that depending on what, if you're able to pay, I know not all opportunities can, there's differences and issues there that are a little bit separate, but you will absolutely be filtering your application pool depending on resources you make available for them to be able to live in that place, especially if you're advertising something nationally or even regionally. So yeah, it might be a good topic for another event as far as getting folks creating these opportunities, getting them together to have a conversation about that, as well as the students applying for them. We'll do a last call for questions. While we're seeing if anyone else has anything, I want to go back to Noah and Ethan about advice, particularly for PIs or supervisors about these kinds of opportunities.
Give your students an opportunity to network. That has been the most helpful thing that my mentor has been helping me with at my college. Anytime I like have a question that's not something he can answer, he'll be like, oh, you need to talk to this person in this department. Here's their schedule, like here's their email, find out when you can have a meeting with them. And it has been beyond helpful.
Yeah, I would totally second this. I know my advisor is not exactly paleo. There aren't a lot of paleo people at the school that I am at, but they've been super helpful in both connecting me to other resources and helping me look for those resources. Even if they're not super versed in it, just any amount of help and steering that they can provide is super helpful, because I came into this pretty much not knowing anyone in the area. So them providing these contacts and providing these names and networks have been invaluable, and actually helped me land one of my internships, which is really cool. So very thankful for that. All
right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, and we are a little past time, so I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you all again, our panelists, as well as folks in the audience with all their great questions, for joining us this morning. All right. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
See you later.